Airing on Asheville FM 103.3 LPFM in Asheville, this is The Final Straw Radio, a weekly anarchist and anti-authoritarian broadcasts and podcast emanating out of occupied Chalagi land in southern Appalachia. We bring you voices and perspectives from projects and struggles all around the world, and you can find our archives, transcripts, ways to follow us and support us at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org. This week, we're featuring two conversations related to the so-called Green Border in Podlaskie region of eastern Poland, on the Belarus border, concerning topics of migration, repression, militarization, nationalism, and solidarity among residents and the people on the move into Fortress Europe. First up, you'll hear Alex, a member of the feminist anti-repression group Szpila Collective, about the H5 Poland case of 5 activists facing charges for aiding people in need in what could be a landmark case for both Poland and Europe. And then you'll find a chat with an anarchist who grew up in this border region and returned in adulthood, and whose affinity group does solidarity work with people on the move through the Białowieża forest. If you want to hear a past interview on immigration solidarity in this area, you can find our July 28th episode of The Final Straw, where we spoke with 2 activists involved in the Grupa Granicza movement. And we've done a couple of other episodes recently concerning immigration across the Mediterranean or at the southern border between the U.S. and Mexico, if you want more context on current border struggles.
Yeah, hello. And first of all, thank you for having me here. My name is Alex, pronounced she, her, and I am a member of Szpila Collective, which is feminist anti-repression group with some anarchist roots based in Warsaw, Poland. And to let you know what Szpila actually is, we are a group of girls whose aim is to provide legal help for people who face different kind of repressions because of their political activity. So we support groups like anarchists, anti-fascists, anti-authoritarians, but also LGBT community, women's strikes, student strikes, sometimes tenants movement, or people who act because of climate changes. And since 2021, we also support people who are active on Polish-Belarusian border and providing humanitarian aid. So what we basically do is we run a phone line available 24 hours, 7 days per week, where people can call in case of arrest, interrogation, or some coming trial. And we'll link those people with lawyers. And sometimes, because in our group, we also have a lawyer, so sometimes we, like ourselves, defend people in front of the court. And we also support them with solidarity campaigns and with spreading information about repressions. And basically, that's why I'm here today to talk to you about one of the coming trials.
That's great. And thank you so much, Alex, for being in this conversation with me. I really appreciate it. So we're here to talk about the H5 case in Poland, whose trial will begin this autumn. Can you talk a bit, give us a rundown of what happened in March 2022, who the activists were that were arrested, and the people that they are aiding?
H5 comes from 5 people who face serious criminal charges, and their trial will be run by court in Hajnówka city in Poland. Maybe we should start from the beginning, because as you maybe already know, since 2021, there is a humanitarian crisis on the Polish-Belarusian border where the new migration route has been opened. Since the very beginning, the Polish state's response was actually only violence, pushbacks, and building a wall. And the only help was provided by local community, some NGOs and groups of collectives who appeared at the spot at the time. And for me, this is one of the greatest examples of solidarity between people with so different backgrounds. But on the other hand, of course, it was never really welcomed by the state. And there were many examples of repressions and criminalization of humanitarian aid. And one example is the attempt to implicate aid workers in organized crime groups or accusations of helping to organize illegal border crossing. And this is also the context of the 5 case. And their story begins on the March 22nd, 2022, when border guards stopped 2 cars, and in those cars they found 4 volunteers providing humanitarian aid on the border with Belarus, and those were very different people, but active on the Belarusian border. Some of them were also active on Ukrainian border, also providing humanitarian aid. And when they were arrested that day, the prosecutor actually requested to put them into pre-trial detention, but the court luckily did not agree with this request. And at the same time, the property of one resident of Podlaskie region was searched as well. So that was the situation in 2020. And at that time, prosecutor wanted to accuse them of organizing illegal border crossing. But in December 2023, the prosecution changed the charges and added a 5th person to the case. So it was this resident I mentioned before. And since that time, the 5 have been accused of aiding those who illegally crossed the Polish border by providing them with food, clothes, shelter, and transport inside the country, which means to the next village. And it's kind of absurd because they got charges literally for helping people who might have died in the forest. And now, according to Polish law, they face up to 5 years in prison.
So I want to go back to the specific charges that folks are facing, but I wonder if you mentioned like this is a deadly situation for the people that are crossing, and that this is like even a short distance that people are being accused of helping folks pass between villages. Can you talk a bit about the experience of people crossing the border from what you've heard, where they're coming from and where they're passing through and where they're going? What kind of conditions and dangers do they face as they travel through Poland towards their destinations?
So people who try to cross the border with Poland come from very different places. Sometimes they are coming from Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, and many, many more. And I think more information about them you can actually find in some reports published by different organizations from Poland. But what is important, many of them have actually fallen into some trap made by Belarusian regime and the business of smugglers, advertising them that the eastern route is safe and fast. And especially at the beginning of the crisis, many people were unprepared for the conditions in the forest, like the swamps and the winter temperatures. So that's why those conditions were just too hard for them. And even if they asked for asylum in Poland, because many of them have asked for that, but from the very beginning, the border guard have never accepting that. They have just pushing back them to Belarus, very often destroying their phones, taking some money from them. So we have some examples of violence reported on both sides, like Belarus side and Polish side. So people who provide humanitarian aid on the border meet people in very different conditions. Most of them are hungry, they face cold, they have been beaten, like so many different things can happen to them. But also most of them almost lost their hope, because even if they ask many times for asylum in Poland, very often it's not accepted. Like the border guard pretends that this kind of application never appeared, and they are just pushed back again to Belarus. And again, the Belarus side is forcing them to cross the border with Poland. So it's like a circle all the time. And some of them spends like months in the forest.
It's not like there's a lot of food available in the forest. That's pretty incredible. But from what I recall from the conversation with folks from Grupa Granicza, there is a legal responsibility for the border guards on the Poland side to start processing someone for their asylum claim if they make the claim, right? It's just them not following their own rules.
Yes, of course, it's actually the law on European level as well. So it's not only the Polish law. Even more, like in Poland, there is a law that oblige you as a person, like every person, to provide assistance when someone is in danger. So if you do not help, the court may sentence you to up to 3 years in prison. And meanwhile, those who actually save lives on the border face a higher penalty for saving the lives.
One of the sticking points that I've heard is the accusation that the 5 people are accused of personally gaining or profiting from the acts of helping people on the move, which seems to equate them with smugglers or human traffickers. And I know that like in the Mediterranean crossing, I've heard that sometimes the person at the head of the boat at the moment gets the extra charge. But can you talk about this accusation and how it interacts with the political situation around the border now in Poland?
Yeah, I think there is a difference between the situation in Poland and in the Mediterranean, because there really like people who are on the move are also forced to run the boats. And here we have a bit different situation because we have just forest and swamps around. But the charge, the 5 face, criminalizes aiding for the purpose of financial or personal gain. And the prosecution claims that the 5 help the refugees for personal gain, but what is more important, not their own gain, but those of the refugees. So this charge sounds completely absurd. And in my view, the 5 case is designed to intimidate humanitarian aid workers. It is also intended to portray humanitarian organizations in a really negative light and produce this wave of untrust and the lack of public support for their work. And this is what the Law and Justice government, which ruled Poland till 2023, did in the past. But it's also the same what is this new government doing. The new government in which like many people wanted to see some hope for an improvement in the situation. But actually now we can see that nothing has changed.
Does this case stand alone? I know it's been going for a few years already, or are there similar cases to it ongoing in Poland?
We are aware that it's not just the case of Poland. And for many years, Fortress Europe has been using strategies to criminalize humanitarian aid in the Mediterranean, in Calais, but also we know of a similar case in Belgium, for example. So Poland is just another chapter of the story, and we as a solidarity group, we want to spread the news around that, hey, now we just face the very same risk as people acting in other parts of Europe and world as well. It's the 5. It's also not the only case like this in Poland, but the first one that is actually going to the court. So we are not really sure when will be the first court hearing, but we suppose it will be in the late autumn. And I think the verdict of this trial will be very important for other cases like this in Poland.
So there's an upcoming week of solidarity actions called for September 13th through the 20th. How can people show their support? How can they take action and raise the issue around the case? And where can people learn more?
We really want to spread the news about the case. So any action that will promote this case, any solidarity action, any info event, any text or talk like we have today is really welcome, and it will be really appreciated. So when you will visit Szpila's website, which is szpila.blackblogs.org, or our account on Mastodon, you can learn more about the Solidarity Action Week, and also you will find information how to contact us if you want to organize, for example, some event or info talk. Of course, according to the fact that we are in Europe and most of you are in US, in your case, maybe only online meeting will be available. But if you are interested in anything like this, just let us know.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And good luck with the case. Thanks for being in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much for this talk.
Pod czujnym władzy okiem, z dala od miejskich okien rozpościera się obraz przejmujący swym widokiem. Odgrodzeni płotem betonowym i blokami, niechciani, nielegalni, nieudokumentowani, tworzą swój mały świat, mają własny regulamin. Sikhowie z Pendżabu, Kurdowie z Rożawy, często z rodzinami, z różnych powodów sami. Wszystkich łączy jedno, jungle here is massive. Welcome to the jungle, czas tutaj płynie inaczej. Salam tobie siostro, salam tobie bracie, usiądź obok ognia przy gorącej herbacie. Salam tobie Maciek, powiedz, czy dobrze dziś spałeś. Hasan, gdzie twoja rodzina? Rodzina boom w Iraku, nikogo już nie mam. Hasan, jak ty się jeszcze trzymasz? Rodzina z Allahem, to od nich jest ta siła. Tu nie czekasz na cud, tylko czekasz na łódź. Inshallah Hasan, inshallah na was. Namiot to Hema, po kurdyjsku koc batani. Inshallah baba, inshallah Rami. Tu nie czekasz na cud, tylko czekasz na łódź. Inshallah Hasan, inshallah na was. Namiot to Hema, po kurdyjsku koc batani. Inshallah baba, inshallah Rami. Ta od lat 90. ponad 100 000 osób dotarło do UK drogą morską. Ile nie przepłynęło kanału La Manche, nigdy się nie dowiemy. Obóz koparką zniszczyć to ich odpowiedź na kryzys. Pierdol się Macron, pierdolcie się wy wszyscy. Pozdro dla aktywistek, dla tych, które są w dżungli. Nie szukaj polityki, znajdziesz tylko zwykłych ludzi. Pomoc rąk nie brudzi, to nie żaden kryminał. Migrant czy asylant też mają prawo do życia, schronienia nad głową czy dostępu do wody. Chcielibyście się pozbyć tak zwanych ludzi drogi. Dla nich te przeszkody, te wszystkie mury, płoty, wszystkie te obozy, detencyjne ośrodki, jebany bik przez płotki, rzucane pod nogi kłody. To kwestia przetrwania, a nie żadne zawody. Nie zostaną sami, bo my nie znamy granic. Będziemy pomagać, mierząc się z represjami. To przywilej być białym, nie chować się przed bombami. Ilu z nas wyjechało, też zostało migrantami. Tu nie czekasz na cud, tu czekasz na łódź. Tu nie czekasz na cud, tu czekasz na łódź. Tu nie czekasz na cud, tylko czekasz na łódź. Inshallah Hasan, inshallah na was. Namiot to Hema, po kurdyjsku koc batani. Inshallah baba, inshallah Rami. Ta push back, 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 push back. Ten złowieszczy tak, to codzienność na rubieżach. Lesbos, Białowieża, Kale czy Dunkierka, kusząca z daleka, bogata i bezpieczna. Forteca Europa, własność białego człowieka. Rosyjska ruletka, co cię po drodze czeka. Nie zabiła cię granica, to przed tobą detencja. Są w Polsce takie miejsca, gorsze od więzienia. Przygotuj się dzieciak na łamanie praw człowieka. We wszystkich ośrodkach to stracona nadzieja. To uciszany temat, jakaś zmowa milczenia. I po to jest ten przekaz, po to żebyś wiedział, że polskie Guantanamo to nie miejska legenda. Dla tych co w detencji, dla was pozdrowienia. Dla zatrzymanych w Krośnie, z fartem powodzenia. Nie złamią was represje ani policyjna przemoc. Zburzymy kiedyś mury, znowu odzyskamy wolność, ta.
If you want to support the Final Straw Radio, you can subscribe to our podcast via various platforms, follow, rate, and share our materials online, and learn more at tfsr.wtf. And if you'd like to fund our transcription work that allows for easier translation, more accessibility of content, and the zines that we produce from each interview, consider picking up some merch from us or making a one-time or recurring donation via PayPal, Venmo, Stripe, or LibrePay, or joining our Patreon to access early release content and other goodies via the links that you can find at tfsr.wtf/support. The Final Straw is a proud member of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts, and here's a jingle from another member of CZN.
I know the kind of pain you're feeling, Alex. I once had it myself.
You some kind of doctor?
No, Alex. I am Magneto, and I have come to offer you sanctuary.
Hello, this is our jingle for our podcast, The Grounded Futures Show.
This is the show where we discuss topics ranging from climate change to identity to how youth can gain new skills to thrive amid current and ongoing disasters that we are collectively facing. We are your hosts, one Gen Z Liam and one Gen X Carla. And we think we all deserve to thrive now and not in some distant utopian future.
Yeah, but that's in the future. Oh, I hate the future.
Yeah, we're with Bolin. Grounded Futures is a larger project, so check that out over at groundedfutures.com.
Yes, so I think like the name or the nickname is really not important. I'm a part of one of groups, and the basis that was organized here around the territory along through the border with Belarus. And we actually started this project in late 2021. And geographically, I think it's also like not really relevant. I mean, we are not in, definitely not in the hotspot, not in the area of the Asian forest exactly, but we are like kind of close by. And yeah, like my political background would be like anti-prison movement. That was my main work for the last years.
And we're kind of speaking right now in terms of solidarity with people on the move or migrants, and around where there's this border militarization going on. Just to sort of, as I promised, I would ask follow-up questions. How did you find yourself shifting your attention from prisoner solidarity or anti-prison work into a focus on freedom of movement, human rights in this manner, and then also borders? Or does it feel like a shift, or does it feel like it's the same topic for you?
I think for sure it's a kind of same thing. And also, I mean, it requires me to change bigger part of my life because I was based in a big city before, and that was my center of activities, not just political, but also like life activities. And with this work here, I actually moved to the countryside where I live for like already more than 2.5 years. But in the same time, I also felt like, yeah, it's those two things, and also a lot of more topics that are actually around the situation here. It's intersectional fight for sure. It's a kind of a continuation. Yeah, like one of the main factors was actually kind of an urgency of the situation. But in the same time, I also felt like, yeah, like people are criminalized here, people are detained, and this situation is really much harder than the people, I would say, on the justice system that we have in our societies, because those people are actually completely excluded from the order that we had in the liberal democracies. So I would say like this is like really fragile and excluded group. So that was for sure like one of the main things why I decided to actually change a little bit like the scope of my political work. But also, like, in the same time, I mean, the really important factor was the fact that I actually coming from this region. So I do the work now in a village, in a region which is like 20 kilometers from a village where I was born and grew up. And I spent like more than a half of my life here. Also, I had the feeling that I barely was involved in any political work here in this region, without some like small exceptions. But yeah, in this terms, it was like really kind of important for me. But this, I think, I mean, the impulse was for sure like this is the region where I grew up. But then I discover much more layers related to this fact too.
So in the last conversation around this general region from the Polish side of the border with Belarus, when I spoke with a couple of activists affiliated with Grupa Granica, or under the umbrella of Grupa Granica, they were talking about the misconception that the so-called green border, or that people crossing through the border with Belarus is somehow a new thing, but that it's a porous area that borders have been imposed on that people have always traveled through. I know that as governments have changed over the decades, even those states in the area have changed greatly. But I wonder if you could talk a bit about the politics and the sociality of the culture of that region and how the border plays into it.
So yeah, I'm kind of agree and disagree. I mean, for sure, in a way, how it is now, this is a new thing. The migration to this border and the level of the amount of people who trying to cross it. But I would also disagree with it, because in a smaller scale, and not only in a smaller scale, there was also situations that there was much more people. There was this situation of mostly Chechen refugees from Russia that trying to get to European Union, and actually they stuck in a border city of Brześć, and many of them were also refused of accepting the will for international protection in Poland on the border, which was also illegal. And there was already the court cases that proved that. But maybe there is also another thing that it's not really known well. I think the situation in Brześć was in 2015, but also in 2014, there was an ice hockey championship in Belarus. And to bring the people for the audience, the regime actually postponed the visa regime for many other countries in the world. And what we know from our comrades in Belarus, there was a lot of people who actually used this opportunity to enter Belarus and try to get into EU. That time, the regime was in a deal with the EU. So because of some financial support and of course transfers of a huge money, they've been still control the migration. So what we know from our comrades, because also some of our comrades in Belarus that time, they've been also in a prison. So actually that time the people if they get cut or they didn't come back after the championship, they end up in regular prisons. And it wasn't just the few people. It's really hard to estimate how many of them were, but it was for sure, it wasn't just statistic mistake, it wasn't just the few people. It was, I would say probably it was hundreds, some hundreds. But also it's really difficult to estimate. So I could be agree and disagree. And historically, actually, we really refer to the situation that happened here in the times of the First World War, when the German army was going to the east. So the huge population of this territory, actually the ancestors of the people who are living here now, they go into huge migration, which was millions of people deeper to the Russia state, and it have a specific historical name. And we had in the families the memories of this migration, because also many people didn't come back or they die on the road. So somehow we had this historically, we had this memories, and the topic of migration was really present in the population here. And also recently with those situations, but also the other, there was of course the huge migration of the Belarusian people in 2020 after the rise up. And even before, there was some waves each year when there was an election in Belarus, there was a repressions just before and maybe 1 year after, and then there was 2 years of kind of a time that you could survive there, and then the situation was was repeating. So there was some waves of people migrating from Belarus to here. So I wouldn't say that the migration itself, it's super new here. I would just say that maybe the circumstances are slightly different. But I also completely disagree with the language that is used for like describing that, like the hybrid war and the hybrid weapon. Like it's super dehumanizing. If we look historically on military conflicts, like migration was always the way that was used to rule the land, to get rid of the people. It's just like the in modern world to dehumanize the people who are right now here in this situation.
And just to clarify, the hybrid war idea is the idea that, for instance, Lukashenko is consciously trying to drive migrants, refugees, or people through the border in order to destabilize Europe in a way that kind of sounds like a replacement theory sort of concept. Is that right?
I mean, you know, I'm really not the politician, and I don't want to be a person who theoretically will speak about the politics, but for sure, like, and that was expressed by him after like 2020 and the revolution in Belarus, like the sanctions were put on a state by the EU. And that time he said, like, okay, if you not take those sanctions, I will stop to control migration on this border. But actually, yeah, like he was, and probably he's still actively participating in that. I think it's also like bigger topic, you know, like for sure, like there was some investigations made around it. So there are people like really close to the regime that profiting, like materially profiting out of like this whole procedure of like offering coming here and passing the green border. But I think also like we don't know that on the Polish side, but I think it's also could be like criminal thing that the whole business on this side is also probably could be connected with the people in power in this state. So yeah, we don't know that. I wouldn't like talk about the politics. Maybe I would just say about like, yeah, we also had here the catastrophe of the Second World War also on this territory, but in the whole Europe. And one of the results of that was the Geneva Convention, that it's imperfect for sure, but it was the answer of like our ancestors, like our grandfathers and grandmothers, and the people who actually survived this nightmare, to protect the other generations and the civil societies to not be in a situation like that. So I'm really surprised that like we live in a world that talking so much about the rights and human rights. And also as a generation, we don't have actually, in my opinion, like the right to just decide that we want to postpone of this legal act. This is also like the really big obligation, and no one had the right to do it because they felt like the situation, it's a little bit more messy or it's modern. I think it's also not modern. It was always like that. We just use the new words to name that.
Because you mentioned coming from a village not far from where you're organizing, talk about your relationship to Podlaskie and a bit about the area and its culture.
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the beginning, I was born here. I grew up in a really small village, still on the time of a socialist system here, or state-ruled communism. So I had some small memories from that time. Yeah, like my family was like just running this small farm. And I think like my grandmother didn't work, but the grandfather was, he had an occupation. And I think the generation of my parents was the first where the woman started to work. And my generation was actually the first that graduate, not even like the university. I mean, I graduated university and some of the members of my family too, but also like my parents didn't graduate high school, you know. The life was that time pretty tough, but in the same time, like I think it's important to also picture a little bit like how it changed with the generation. So there was for sure in the socialist times, there was a huge transfer of massive numbers of people, like economically and socially, like people move to the cities, they get the regular jobs. So that would be my background. But my background is also that actually I don't feel, and I never felt like the national identity. First of all, because like my family is like the religious minority. My grandmother from the father's side, she never speaks Polish, dialect of the region where she was living. Also, like my parents still using that with the people that they know that also use that. Another factor for me, I think, which build the more relation to the region itself, not just the region of Podlasie in Poland, but the region where I am, which also is I feel about it as a like geographical part, not really divided with the border, was the high school education that I took. So I graduated high school with where we have a bunch of Belarusian history and the language. And I think like for the person who was like just constructing the view of the world for himself, like the situation that you actually learn the same stories, the same history, but from the two perspectives, which sometimes are like completely opposite. Like the things that we've been learning in Polish history was like, I don't know, like the unity with the countries on the east in their history. It's more like an occupation. Yeah, it gives you like the idea also about like how oppressive was the concept of a nation and the state itself. And later on, I also learn about it, not in really like conceptual way about this identity that was exist here, because many people were living in the village, and still in the 19th century, most of them, especially on the east, like in territory of today's Belarus or Ukraine, they've been like serfdom, and the aristocracy was from Polish Catholic class. Most of those people, like they barely moved from villages where they live, so they didn't identify themselves actually with any of the nations. There was this identity of like being from here and using the language also from here, which is now like the dialect that it's used here, and actually it's also like a little bit different village by village. So yeah, that's the way how I actually build my relationship with the region. That of course, like I forgot when I moved out here, and the time spent here after coming back, like really reminds me that. But also it gives me like the new perspective on this modern political ideas about like post-national identity. When I first heard about it, it was for me like a academic concept. Maybe that would be fine for the people who migrate from the continents and the countries and live in the multicultural societies and in the big diasporas. And they cultivate like both things, like the roots that they or their families coming from, plus they are the members of societies of what they are living today. For me, it was like many times like pretty abstract, or I felt like, okay, it's not like related completely to me. And with the coming back to this like background that I actually learned from the childhood and later a little bit with my education, I felt like, yeah, like it's really possible, and it's not so abstract, and it's not so academic, and like, yeah, this is how the world was functioned before the modern national states were founded, you know? Like many other communities, they didn't really have this national identity, especially like if you've been in poverty and like you struggle economically and you struggle like each day for like your living conditions, like you didn't care about the state and the flag and autumn and wars that some people are doing in the name of that.
Would you talk about the sort of work that you do in solidarity with people traveling through this region that you come from? And are you part of a group in particular or a network that you want to name? Or is it just sort of unaffiliated and impromptu?
So, yeah, I'm a part of a small group which is grassroots organized. It's actually like that was the impulse for this group. Like the main impulse was that actually we have access to the place where we could start our activities and bring some other folks who would like to support that in this region. Because like not me, but also other people are coming from here. Yeah, but in the same time, like we had the feeling that we don't feel the necessity of like being a former member of anything. But in the same time, like one of the things that I really admire here is actually like the sense of common. So we cooperate with the other people, also with the other places like this or slightly different organized with some organizations too, because like the short-term thing, it's pretty the same. Plus there is also important, except the like organized groups or like organizations, also the individuals from the local community. Actually, they are the people who actually start this work. Like there was no NGOs and the groups where all of the things start, and those people individually or organizing with those that they know, like they start to do solidarity work. And when we came here, actually, we didn't feel like we support them with this work because they've been before us, and I think they would manage also without us, without the NGOs and organizations. Of course, like the work would be not so efficient and not as well organized, but there are still people who are committed to that and continue with the third year. And it's really important to notice that, but also like, to be aware about it. At the same time, I don't want to say that it's a massive movement. So the general feeling is anti-migration, Islamophobic. In this region, actually, the far right or the right government that was when the situation starts was actually elected by the people here. They win here in this region, and that's the feelings. But this is also like the kind of a space that actually you could work on it. So with this project and these activities, for me personally, like with my work that I did before, and also like in the groups and communities where I were, that was pretty the same politicized as me. Was it difficult? Of course it was difficult, but also like the most amazing thing to actually get out from your bubble and start to work with the people that sometimes you just have different opinions. But in the same time, like on the short term goal, like supporting directly people here, despite of idea, like bigger idea that you would have about like if the border should exist or not, if the state should exist or not. Like, yeah. And we felt like with doing this work with the people, we don't want to actually put this leftist politicized agenda that people are not familiar, but rather like through this work, finding the opportunities to talk about the things. And mostly we talk about the things in relation to the daily work that we do. So we actually not had the political discussions, like abstract one, but sometimes like there are like people situation that they require to some bigger discussion about like why we are here and why we do this work and why we want to do it in some particular way and not in the other way.
Like when I spoke to the other people from the people who were identified as affiliated with Grupa Granica, they talked about, doing accompaniment and helping people file for asylum status, or going and doing deliveries of food and clothing by getting an alert on their phone and then going and visiting folks and giving them aid. Like what sort of work does your group engage with on the ground? It sounds, you're also having conversations with folks around you, whether they're moving or not, which is great. But yeah, what does that work look like?
I would not say anything new that the people said. And also like most of the work that we do, it's pretty the same. And also like the people that we cooperate, we are mostly agree on a way how we would like to do this work. And it's really based on the experience, which means that we also learn from our experience. The thing is that like we are here and those small organizations, because when it starts and with the months, like there was no response from any of a NGO or like state structure that supposed to respond to this situation. There was no any of a humanitarian organization in Poland that decided to come here. And for me, it's also important to remember, we trying to improve our skills to be able to support people better and maybe in a more like professional way, in a sense of like the medical needs that the people have, or the way how we run a conversation with the people and such a things. But in the same time, I think like most of us, and not just us people here in my group, but also like even like the people who actually could be called now the humanitarian workers, like I think no one of us wanna do that. And actually we came here because they didn't came. So yeah, this is the, I think, really important things. And I would say like we do mainly the same stuff, because also like the same people approaching us, and we actually respond to not specific needs of the people, but mainly regarding to the territory. So also like we trying to like think about it in a little bit bigger perspective, that this like the approach that we have to the people, like should take into account like the individual situation, but in the same time, like mostly like we don't have enough capacity to support people, especially in the seasons where the number of crossings were huge. Also in the terms of like material support, like there was for a really long time, like the lacks of things like the supplies that we give to the people in the forest were actually like collected not just in this country but also in the other countries. So we also trying to like keep the same treatment for the people that we meet. Of course, like taking into account the individual situation, but to not treat the people that actually we meet way better, because this is the people that we meet and such a thing. I think it's important. And of course, like this work was changing because it's a third year, so the situation on the border is really dynamic. There are some stuff that was done before and they didn't work, or they are not needed anymore. From this year, there is way more legal support given to the people, but also it's because for short time there was a chance that actually they request for international protection will be accepted, and they will be able to get in the procedure. For a really long time, it was really impossible, and the state and all of the uniformed services violate this basic human right. So yeah, I wouldn't say that we do some specific things. Maybe we are also keen a little bit on the way how we do that. So for this last 2.5 years, no one of us was in a labor relationship to this work, which was important for me, not just from this dogmatic thinking about I will not do the political work for the money, but I couldn't imagine actually myself in a situation where I have folks who are hired and the folks who are not. And then the thing that we expect from each other are different. And for example, if we need to respond to the call, we would say okay, this guy is getting the money, so he's supposed to go. And I think this really creates the kind of hierarchy in the group. But at the same time, we fell on ourselves, how damaging this work is in the long term, and how long it took us to actually be able to say that we don't have the capacities to do that, also in the terms of we are just tired. So it's really important for us that the people who do this work with us, they actually have a space to express their difficulties with going for the intervention work, doing things on the field, not feel obliged or really pressure on that if they don't do that, people will be in, they wouldn't be supported. Actually, yeah, of course there is a pressure, but we also trying to create a space for people to openly talk about they even day by day personal situation, because we also felt if you really don't want to go and you will go, it could not work for anybody. It will not work for you and also for the people who you trying to support. So I think this approach, it's also really present in our place and important for us. But then the physical work is slightly the same.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate you expressing that, because burnout is real. And also I think, like you said, there is an important intentionality to if you need to make a boundary, don't just blame it on the fact that you're not on shift right now and not being paid. If you think it's important to do, then do it for the right reasons. And but it is hard to exist in society without wage jobs, though maybe it means that you just do something else for money other than the thing that you really care about, which is what I do and a lot of the people that I know. You had mentioned the change, how dynamic of a situation the border can be. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the changes that you've seen leading to the increased militarization of the border from the Polish side, and how this changed, or is it changing, the villages around the green border?
Yeah, for sure. In this last 3 years, there were few important factors that shift a little bit, the general approach of the state, of uniform services, but also engaging people to the support work and the stuff that we do. I think it's important to mention, for sure, the escalation of a war in Ukraine that completely changed also the idea why this situation started half year before, because before the Russia invade the Ukraine, I think like the general feeling was, and what I said at the beginning about like, yeah, like Lukashenko trying to make another deal with the EU, and no one really connected with Russia so much. That's the first thing. The second side of it was that actually like a lot of people from civil society, but also like the people who've been engaged here, they moved their interest to the Ukraine. So yeah, like people, and also like maybe the necessity at the beginning was, and the feeling was that, yeah, it's a massive number of people that need support, and that was actually kind of a work at the beginning. Also with the support of the people who was doing the support for the migrants here. But later, and I think it even wasn't later, like in general, like we had the feeling here, because I was the person who said like, yeah, I don't want to move my interest to the border with Ukraine, because I think this work here, it still need to be done, and we don't have capacity and resources. And actually, like when I seen the massive movement of like just regular people who was going by private cars to the border and picking up the people, I felt like it's a good decision, but in the same time I felt like, okay, like those people are actually doing the same thing that we do here. I mean, we support the people who are escaping from the wars, and really that's like life situations. It's caused by the same states, by the same imperialism, but we here, like 100 kilometers from the boarding crosses with Ukraine, we are treated as criminals, and we're doing this work when all of the people who actually show up and show the solidarity with the Ukrainians being treated like publicly as a heroes, and our state also like really benefit out of it, like how the support for the Ukrainian refugees was look like at the beginning. And there was a small thing about the necessity related to the situation, because yeah, the situation shows actually the racist background of like how we treat refugees and migrants, but also like the situation on the border with Ukraine itself showed that too. So the people who didn't had the Ukrainian passports, the Black people, the people from the Roma community, they weren't treated the same as the people who had the Ukrainian passport. They face really big difficulties to actually leave the country on the first days of war. And of course, later, like with the whole policy that EU and the national states introduced to support people who escape to their territories, like the social security was given only for the people who had the Ukrainian passports. So yeah, so that was like for sure like really important thing. And maybe in the last months, I think the important factor was that there was an incident with a soldier who died on the border because he was assaulted through the fence from the other side with a knife on a stick, that actually still no one knows who did that. Of course, like there was an investigation, and it's scandalized that they had some informations about it was a migrant person and so on. So with this incident that happened in the beginning of June, they immediately introduced quite of the same exclusion zone that was exist at the beginning of a situation here. The attitude of and like the government give a right to the soldiers to actually be assholes again. and violate all of the rules, and also like the way how the so-called service should look like to the civil society.
You mean like expanding the like requisite state service in the state in terms of changing how the quote-unquote service looks?
Yeah, be aggressive again to the civils, but also like officially they get more and more power. The exclusion zone was again to like protect them on the violence and the crimes that they do to the people on the move on this border. And lately, like in the parliament, there was a legal act that actually legalized the unprocedural using a weapon on this of the soldiers on this border,
like a gun,
which is like really really dark thing. Also, if you connect this with the fact that from August we have 17,000 soldiers here, mainly from unprofessional army, like the teenagers who like probably like 2 years ago they've been shooting on the computer games, and now they are here without any like serious preparation, also with the like estimating the danger and be a little bit prepared to like how to respond to the like stress situation and stuff like that. I think it's a really really scary here.
Where are all these soldiers going to be, or where are they being kept, and how has that changed the shape of the demographics, like of those small villages that often made their money off of like tourism in the area?
Yeah, I think especially for the region where the national park is and the last piece of Asian forest in Europe, or the forest that had still natural processes ongoing from like 10,000 years, because this forest was also damaged not just by historically, but also like in the modern times, both by the far right, but also like right now we have the so-called like liberal government, and they also cannot really do anything to keep this forest in a way that will be still valuable for the people who will live here in the future. But yeah, I mean, for this place, the bad time starts with the COVID, and actually the situation with the border continued that. There was any serious response from the government to actually like respond to the fact that what you said, like a lot of people actually live here from tourism, and this is how this territory should be transformed, like to offer and create such a work for the people if we want to protect this forest, but at the same time like keep the economical justice and offer to these people something instead of like closing the factories or the industry complexes here. So that didn't happen, and then the army arrived. But I wouldn't say that it's reducing the loss of people who live from the tourism. Actually, I would be like really scary. I witnessed a lot of the situation here, especially like in 2021 and 2022, but it's still present that like those people, soldiers, they come into the supermarket with a car, and many of them entering for the shopping with the machine guns. Like they use a public space with heavy guns. They damaging the local roads, killing also like the protected animals. Like this national forest is known from the reintroductions of European bisons. So some of them get killed already by the army trucks. because also like they use them out of the rules that are put in on the civil society. So also like in the front of my house, like they just drive like at least 70 when the limit is 50. So there is a lot of damage done by day present. And yeah, there was this scandal situation that they actually been living in a sport hall in one of the primary schools in one of the villages. Right now, they're trying to build some new facilities and a bases in this region to actually have a more and more army here.
So more than any other interview that I've done in the last 15 years that I can think of, I've seen anonymous online comments about the last conversation that I had about work around the border in Podlaskie, referring to anti-Semitic conspiracy theories like this work with refugees and with people on the move is funded by Soros and things like that. And obviously in that anecdote, I have no idea where those people are coming from, but there's a lot of anti-immigrant and Islamophobic and anti-Black and other sentiments that are all tied up in this like anti-Semitic, xenophobic framework that is in a lot of European and North American culture. And we had an interesting conversation at one point. I wonder if you could talk about your insights into Polish legacies from the World War II era and any parallels that you're seeing now with cultural, political, and repressive relationships directed at migrants and other political others, as how that parallels with, for instance, historical anti-Roma or anti-Semitic violence that's happened in Poland.
Yeah, so I think like if you look in the past, even like in the school books, but probably you also should go a little bit deeper because those informations are also like vanished from our memory somehow. I mean, we mentioned a little bit about like anti-Semitism in Poland before the Second World War, but in general, like the history is constructed in a way that we have to be good, the other are bad, and maybe some people made the mistakes, but in general, like we've been heroes or the victims. There is no other good positions in a history, and I think like the Polish history it's a really, really good example of that. If you analyze actually like what was happening in Poland before the Second World War, like it kind of reminds the way how the things are communicated now due to the situation on the border with Belarus. So the people are same dehumanized, like the Islamophobia is not just the far right, but also like the kind of conservatives that do that, but also like so-called liberal government, which is actually like also like liberal in the terms of economy maybe, but in the terms of like other things, it's pretty conservative and also like serving to the far right. They also start to use before the election, because at the beginning this government was actually presenting how shocked they are, how was the response of the far right government to the situation on the border. And right now I think the response is even like more harsh in a different ways, but they also start to use just before the election and after like this dehumanized language, xenophobic and racist. And for a person who actually was raised in a society like the village that I grew up and also like the city that I was living, mainly in this area for the half of my life, like both had around like half population of Jewish people. And I didn't have the adults, like the older people in my family that I could speak about that. But for sure, like if you realize that the grandmother that was taking care about you when you were young is actually the person that lost like the half of the population of a place that she was living. And then like the town that I was living, the same. And later when I moved to Warsaw, like the history in Warsaw was pretty the same, but in a way, way bigger scale. And I think it's more known for the people. and the whole thing about the Holocaust. But in the same time, I mean, yeah, it was thing organized by the German Nazis, or Nazis that get to the power in Germany in that time. But that was also with the acceptance of like the other political fractions, except the communists and socialists, because like they've been the first victims of this regime when they get to the power. Now in Poland, we actually don't have such a political spectrum. The political party that they call themselves like left, they actually like almost go in the same acclamation for militarization, for protecting the border. Maybe they don't use so much the language that was used by the other political options, but actually like they also not actively opposed to the politic. And also like symbolically, there was when there was this voting about this use of a gun out of procedures for soldiers, that they can do that or they would not be prosecuted when they do here on this border. Like not all of the members of this political left party was against that. There was just some of. And I think it's important to mention also like how the left, like the parliament left, change with the years, because like still like 80 years ago or like 40 years ago, the political spectrum was completely in a different place. And yeah, if you realize that, you feel like you are really close to another catastrophe, like the big catastrophe. But I think for us here, and for the people who trying to get to EU through this border, I think this catastrophe is happening already. And yeah, like with the whole of the feelings about and all anti-Semitism before the Second World War, I mean, it was done by the Nazis on the Polish territory, but it was a good ground also for like those things happening here, and I think also not here, also in the other countries where the Jewish population was exterminated in a massive scale. Yeah, so with this, and then like in the 90s, when you grow up here and you live in a town where they're telling you that this is like multi-generation region where you have a Catholics, Orthodox, and Muslims, and they like in this discourse they completely vanishing the history of the Jewish people here. Like, yeah, that was weird, and I think it's weird still. Actually, now this recognition of a people like civil society on this territory, and their responsibility also, like active responsibility, because there was those cases that people participate or like they do the mass killing of a Jewish people by them own, or just right after the war finished. Yeah, it's really kind of yeah, I think like we are really close to the situation that those things can explode. And especially if you just like look what's going on in the UK those days, I think like we are just like on just like the small incident, and yeah, that things could happen, not just here, not just in this region, not just in Poland, but also in the other countries. I think like in Germany could be quite the same, and France and the other countries. It's really, really scary.
And it's especially scary for countries that haven't, I mean, coming from the US myself, like the US culturally has not dealt with its history and ongoing, anti-Black and settler colonialism, anti-Indigenous roots. So, as you say, when like the soil is prepared to take the seed of anti-Semitism or xenophobia or Islamophobia, it spreads really quickly in a frightening manner. So I guess like my follow-up question to this is, like you mentioned doing work in the community, like that, the work that you came to do in that region was in support of pre-existing work that locals were doing to support people on the move, and that having these interactions with people generally is important to, and doing the work like shows people the humanity of the people that you're working with. The like having interactions with people that are on the move oftentimes does a lot to expand people's humanity and their sense of justice. That's hard and slow work. And I wonder if, in light of, for instance, the race riots by the far right in the UK and Ireland and other places, like, do you have insights into pushing against the cultural tide of xenophobia and militarism? Or do you have any stories that you can share that can serve as examples of where you've seen the sort of like positive work actually undermine that sort of racism?
I think I will just shortly maybe still come back to the last question, because I think it could be kind of a bridge to this one. So also like be raised in the society and in this nation, like we've been learned all the time that, like the colonialism, like it's not us because we never had the colonies. Actually, we didn't exist for like more than 100 years. Like the other way of like exploiting people wasn't come to it, because like the serfdom was building the peak of the state in the previous centuries, and so on and so on. But the thing is that we could like tell those stories to ourselves and our kids, but I think like with the fact that when we decided to enter to EU and be like the part of this, one of the few most exploiting and like post-colonial powers in the world, like we benefit as individuals, as a society for sure, and me, of course, totally too. But we need to also be aware that actually we join the power that is like post-colonial and keeping the post-colonial order in this world. And we also need to be aware about the consequences of that. So I just wanted to make this thing, and maybe also like to come back to your last question and a little bit to the militarization. I think also like the militarization and the whole propaganda about the war here, that it's it's almost on our territory, that we'll have a war with Russia in 2 years. And we have to prepare for that. Like we need to put more of economy into like army and producing stuff. That was done from 2021, and I think like it was a successful action. And I think like it's mainly like this is how it works. Like those kind of things just scare the people, and they can accept like, I don't know, the social cuts, the spending from the budget for like social things, but because they feel unsecured physically. And I think this is what this situation is doing and what the politicians are doing. And this is like the thing that is repeating in a history all and all again. But my question would be to these politicians, like, what you did to like didn't bring us to this situation? With this, like no one, is up to taking the responsibility. And there is no discussion in our societies about that. Actually, like how we end up not just as a country that could be in a risk of military aggression of the other state, but also as a like bigger structures. Like just it's important to start to speak about that. The way how this world is organized, it's working, like, and this is like actually a little bit like the situation that we here in Europe, we first time feel that, the things that were going on in most of the world for the last 80 years, the conflicts that was inspired or like supported by the Western world, or like the communist imperialism or the China imperialism, like for the 80 years, I feel like we've been living in a kind of a bubble, pretending that it doesn't attach to us. So I think we are maybe not in a whole Europe, but I think in Poland right now we have a feeling that actually like the end of these times coming to us too. And the response of like just the xenophobia and militarization and building the borders, it's like, when you have a diarrhea, you will not treat it with the toilet paper. Like you need to take the medicines and of course the reasons of, and not the bad situation that you end up in. And I think like that the things which you mentioned are actually like just like cleaning the surface, and it's just like populist, it's like, it's so populist. If you are in Europe now and you start to talk about like how bad is militarization, like you will be a Russian agent or whatever. Like there is, in this sense, like, and this is like also like kind of a maybe also modern thing, like how you actually limit the freedom of speech in a Western societies through also like using this like modern language of a hybrid war, because or like infiltration or such a stuff. And this is of course like there are those people who doing that, but also like there is no space for the other opinions and perspectives, and this not giving us any chance to move forward. Like we will stuck in the place where the capitalism and the Western imperialism want us to be in. And maybe on the end, I would just also say that I had also migrants in my family from the generation of like my parents. So there was a people who, like one of my uncles, he actually spent the rest of his life, and he just came back just before die, from Iran. There was from the other side of the family, my uncle, that she was still sending us the postcards in the 80s from the place that she ended up. It was Uzbekistan. She was living in Tashkent, and I remember that because also like I was interested in that. Like there was a lot of movies, for example, by this documentarist from Iran, Mehdi Naderi, that he was like exploring the situation of a Polish massive migration on the Second World War in Iran, and how it was supported not just by the people but also by the state. And I think like the thing that we are doing now is actually like, I wouldn't be surprised that in a future, if I will be recognized as a Pole by the majority of the countries in this world, I would be like, like the asshole, like the aggressor, because the people who we have on this border, they actually come in mostly from Middle East, quite big part of Asia, and also like majority of countries in Africa continent. I do feel that even like if I question my national identity, I actually like I keep this passport. I use this privilege to be a member of a privileged society in this world, and I think this also held some obligations. And I would like to actually like be in a community where we will not invest in like marketing campaigns about like to convince people how amazing country and nation we are, but actually like with the money that we pay for like advertising agencies, we actually could accept all of the people who we had here. I think like it's really difficult to estimate like how many people could come here to this last 3 years, but I wouldn't say that it was like more than 100,000 if you compare it to like more than 1 million people that we actually accepted in the first days of war from Ukraine. Like it's nothing, you know. Like if I will start to think about the how inefficient is actually like also economically the thing that we do, that if it would be organized by like to the system, like people wouldn't have to like wear the stuff that we will give them for one day, and after another night with the rain they need to change and leave the stuff again and stuff like that. So also like here I think like we really facing and challenging like this whole concept of like humanitarian support given by the Western countries, and like all of the like contradictions and like failures of a capitalism too.
Is there anything that I didn't ask about that you want to say here at the end of the chat, or any places that people could, if they don't live near the border, organizations or movements that they could learn more, or that where their donations would actually go further? Like Shops Without Borders was one of the listed things in the last chat. That's an immediate material way to help folks who are crossing, right?
Yeah, also like there are various ways of like giving the support for the organizations and the way that they do. Actually, like the support would be also like if people feel like about coming here, that could be possible. And I wouldn't like publicly share any contact to us, but I think maybe through you, like we could be reachable. So if there will be any people who listen that, I just want to say that we had the folks from states. We know people from No More Deaths from Arizona. We also work together here. There are some other people from other continents also coming here. Of course, like in this place, like there is one part of the world, like Western world, supporting the people from the other part of the world. But yeah, I think like for the all like Western citizens, it's still pretty safe to do that, comparing to the people from countries that they don't have strong passports, states are not recognized as allies, and so on and so on. So it's not just about like to tell that the Westerns have just I don't know, like economical possibility, but also like we had this reflection about like who actually can come and do this work and who not. So we invite all of the people. We're trying to make the space accessible for everyone, also in terms of like economy. So that could be done. And our place is mostly based on also fundraising that we do, but we not do it like really openly. So there is nothing that I could share, like how we could be supported. But if someone will want, I think they find a way to get to us. And that would be, also like in a symbolical way, it would be nice to receive the support from farther places. This village where we live is really like the end of a state, but also like the end of one imperialist structure, which is EU. We are pretty isolated also from the other groups. So we have just the contacts mostly with the folks who are coming here. So it's always nice if people are reaching us with any like curiosity or questions, or like kind of just like cheering us up. that means a lot.
Cool. And people with medical skills, with Arabic or French or Polish, I guess, language skills would be pretty helpful, not to limit who would come visit you, but is that helpful, or are there any other like skill sets that you're looking to get?
I mean, for sure, like if you have this like the hard skills, like the medical or like driving license or some languages, that of course helpful. But as I said at some point, like we are here because we are not like the humanitarian NGOs didn't show up. Also, like the people who are trained to do that, like they have this hard skills, also language skills, and some other. We not expecting that people will have really specific skills. They could not have any of them, and it's still fine. Because in the end, we believe that this work shouldn't be done at all. Like we want to live in a world when there's such a work will not be needed at all. And also like the way how it's mostly delivered. And also sometimes in the case of us, I mean, this is also like the questions that we have, like how you could navigate you getting to the endpoints of work that you do, to the really many contradictions, even if you are like kind of educated or you know about like the Western society humanitarian approach. I mean, it's really also sometimes difficult to do the stuff completely against, but it's really worth to try to question the things and try to maybe do things slightly different, to not also like make this order as an accepted one. So we trying to do that. We had the conversations here about that, trying to also have a reflections and critical reflection to also our attitude, our like behavior and stuff like that.
Cool. Well, I've really appreciated the conversation, and thanks for the time and the energy of speaking in English with me, and I'm excited to share this with folks.
Cool. Thank you for your work too. I said like it will be it's nice to get some even symbolical support, but we also not aware here in Poland like about the many of the work that is done on your territory. So yeah, we will be also like up to support some of the other people with even just like sending to ourselves like postcards and cheering up together. Yeah.
This is The Final Straw Radio. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions and suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net or thefinalstrawradio@protonmail.com. If you'd like to use any episode for your project or radio show, feel free to do so. Just send us an email to let us know. If you care to, you can send us letters at TFSR, P.O. Box 6004, Asheville, North Carolina, 28816. Programming support is brought to you by Firestorm Books. Located at 1022 Haywood Road in West Asheville, Firestorm is a bookstore and social movement space owned by its workers, in operation since 2008. Their event calendar and complete catalog of books can be found online at firestorm.coop.